Everything looks good. Hi guys, haven't uploaded in a while. Been a few years, actually, I believe. Easing back into it, trying a new setup, new stuff. Hopefully things will look better, sound better in the future, but for now, just trying to ease back in, make some new videos. Starting off with God of War. Wasn't sure what else to start on. This controversy popped up. There was also the Amazing Digital Circus finally ending, the back rooms, a lot of other stuff. I'll probably make videos on those in the next few days, hopefully. But I wanted to start with talking about this first. A lot of people debating over this game, a lot of accusations being thrown back and forth. There is a side saying that it's just woke garbage that is going to push a narrative, and there's the other side defending it, saying it's just as good as all the other games, and that they've done absolutely nothing wrong, but simply have made another masterpiece. I disagree with both sides on some issues, but I will be honest with you at the start of this, I agree more with the people who are against it. And I'll explain why, and in this video, I just want to go over the main, what I feel like are the most popular and main complaints and just debates about this new God of War game. But before we dive into any of that, let's just hear a few words from the opposition. And if you feel like I'm not being fair by not showing both sides, I'm on the other side, in a sense, so you're gonna get that side from me. I don't know, this kind of pissed me off. I'll explain more after we watch.
Let me be abundantly clear. If you don't have interest in God of War Laufey because it stars a woman, Kratos' wife, this is not the podcast for you.
Correct.
Please fuck off to the local rope store. You absolute piece of shit, dude.
Correct.
What the fuck is wrong with people, dude? This is mind-blowing. And if you're a God of War fan at all, this should check every fucking box for you.
We, as a community, spent the last week debating whether or not Laufey deserves to be the main character of the game, whether this game deserves to fall under the God of War banner, and the most idiotic topic of all, whether Deborah Ann Wall, an absolute goddess of a human, is hot enough to play Kratos' wife. You have got to be kidding me. And we want to debate in 2026 about whether half of the population has a place in gaming? Give me a break, dude. Out of all of the isms, all of the phobias that exist, sexism is the one that makes the least amount of sense to me.
It looks like Forspoken. It's got that flavor to it. It feels very uninspired.
When that God of War Laufey demo began, a lot of us knew 20 seconds in that Epstein's loyal soldiers were going to be up in arms about a woman-led God of War game. And I'd say I've gotten pretty good about blocking the noise from the grifters out. They're bots and very predictable. Plus, I have consensual sex. Anyone with a healthy sex life isn't watching these dudes. They make money exploiting the low confidence and ineptitude of unquenched losers. We all know this.
Some very deep and complex arguments from the opposition telling us why we're wrong and why we're very immoral and bigots for not supporting this game or being excited for this game. We'll come back to some of that stuff, but first we'll just go in order. I kind of have them written down here, just some of the main topics for debate and discussion over this. We'll go over 5 things, try to do it quickly. And just so you know, yes, the playing as a man versus a woman, yes, that is going to be obviously on the list, and I'm going to save that for last. That is the biggest debate here, I believe, and it's the biggest controversy, splitting everybody apart. And we'll just save that one for the end of the video. Number 1 is the God of War title, like it says there, God of War. I'll go through this quickly. I disagree with both sides on this discussion. I don't have a huge problem with it. I disagree with the opposition trying to defend it by saying, well, there's gods of war in the game. She is a god of war. She's a goddess and she goes to war, so technically it's correct. And then people on my side will say, no, it only belongs to Kratos, and if he's not in the game, you can't put that there. For the side saying that, well, she's a god of war and there are gods of war in the game, they're being dishonest. They really are. It's not called that because there are gods of war in the game. If the new team behind this and the game director for this one come out and say that, they are being disrespectful, I believe, to the fans of this franchise and not being honest with them, because it's called God of War referencing Kratos. It's not referencing her. For the other side saying, okay, he's not in there, you can't have it then. I disagree with that too. I don't see too much of a problem with it. You can see right there on the screen, there's a tiny little TM there next to the word war because it's in the God of War franchise. And the opposition will say things like, well, you know, Kratos technically wasn't a god of war until he killed the God of War, so he wasn't even the God of War in the first God of War. Yes, he was. At least the title is referencing him in the first game and the second one and so on. It's referencing him. It's in his universe. It's in Kratos' universe. It's a character from his games. It's not like some guy just came along and said, I'm going to make a character about Loki's mom, and it's not connected to the Kratos game, the God of War games whatsoever. He's just doing it on his own. That didn't happen. This is in the God of War franchise, so that's the only reason it's there. Don't really care about that too much. They refuse to use words like spin-off, like it's just a smaller chapter, but instead they want to just say it's a full-on chapter. She's just as important as Kratos. All of this is just leading into number 2 on the list, which is just as strong as Kratos, is the claim that we heard recently in an interview, and people were not happy about that. At this point, I'll be honest, I've played the first 2 games, and I played the 2018 version when it came out on PC. Other than that, I'm unfamiliar other than looking up lore and watching some videos online, so I'm not going to say I've played every single God of War game or I've read all the comic books. Apparently there are comic books, and that's where people are getting this lore from, that Kratos and Faye had a fight to a standstill, and he said he respects her as an equal fighter or equal in strength. I'll put it up on screen if I can find it, whichever one he said. From what I did research, he never said that in the video games. He only said that in books written outside of the games, and they're considered canon, but as much as you want to consider that canon, you would also have to consider the original creator of the games canon as well. And not sure if he would agree with that. But when you have a brand new character that is just brought in all of a sudden and say, they're just as strong as the character you've known and loved for years, just as skilled, just as strong. You've never seen her in the games except for a few minutes at a time, her death, and heard about influence. Now we want you to play a full game as her, and we expect you to be just as hyped and just as excited as you would for any other God of War game. That's just not going to happen with a brand new character, and typically bringing in a new character and saying she's just as strong as a previous character when the actions those characters have taken throughout their history don't add up to equal feats. That also kind of presents itself as a plot hole, and people aren't too happy with that. So Kratos has killed a number of gods, including Zeus, Hercules. As far as I know, Faye has been the way she's been for years, and I'm sure she's encountered many of powerful gods that were drunk with power, that were evil, and Kratos seems to be the only one that went about killing them. Faye seems like she would have wanted to do the same, but apparently she didn't when she was just as strong as Kratos, but Kratos was the one that actually got all that done. Maybe there's lore reasons for that, I don't know, but so far it looks like his feats have been a sign of greater strength than hers. According to the God of War wiki, as much as you want to trust that source, he's stronger. I think people made a decent point that she died pretty easy in the games, possibly showing that they weren't too sure if this standalone game for her was even going to happen in the future. Alana Pierce did say she's been writing it for the past 4 years, so not sure if that was completely in the works ever since 2018. We're kind of bleeding into number 3 here, which is probably the same, so 2 and 3 are probably the same, but just her being new. Her being his wife, and involved in the story and talked about in the past by other characters. People are using this as an argument, saying it's Kratos' wife, Kratos would hate you guys for not supporting her. Very weird, also, as if a fictional video game character would understand the logistics of a video game and advertising and trying to get a fan base to love it. That's just a very weird concept. I understand why we talk that way sometimes, but it's becoming a viral response to the people who are not too excited for this game, and it's just not a good argument. They made a John Wick video game trilogy that was incredible, and then the 4th chapter was you playing as the dog, and people went around saying, well, how dare you not be excited to play this game? John Wick would hate you because John Wick loved that dog. That doesn't make any sense. There's nothing wrong with having her be as strong as him. Here you have might and magic mixed together. You have supernatural elements so that a woman like her can be as strong as a male god because of magic and how that can balance things. But again, if you're just going to bring her in with equal strength, while in the past you do not have her feats lining up with his and everything they've done, it's going to look like a plot hole, and it's going to look like you're just trying to make her that way for the sake of politics, or simply doing it because she's a woman and You just have to do that to match her up to Kratos. So number 2 and 3 were kind of the same thing, so maybe there's only 4 things on this list, but she's a new character, she's his wife, that doesn't really matter, he loves her, that doesn't really matter. Same thing with his son, but people weren't even too excited when there were theories going around about playing the son in a standalone game. People were not super excited about that. That's his son, and we've been with that character for 2 games, and still people weren't too excited about that and still wanted to play only as Kratos. Doesn't mean we don't like that character, just means we like Kratos more. Well, number 4 on the list is going to be Frank. Or Huey, the Jello cube, as I like to call him. Jack Quaid starring as the cube is just something I'm not a big fan of. A lot of God of War fans are not a fan of. Saw him in the trailer, I saw him speaking as the cube, bouncing around, hitting the enemy in the gameplay trailer as the cube, and a couple people were saying it was taking them out of the experience, and even when they liked the gameplay trailer, when they liked the demo, the cube popping in time and time again and just talking was taking them out of the experience. I can understand that. Might have a controversial little take on this, but maybe Jack Quaid cast as his character is somehow to make Faye seem tougher and stronger. It is just a very generic looking cube, and Jack Quaid has only been cast in roles most of the time where he plays a wimpy dude who is not exactly a man's man. The Boys, Scream. He's typically given similar roles to Jay Baruchel, I think that's how you say his last name, the guy who voiced Hiccup in How to Train Your Dragon, and also other movies he's been in, he's played similar characters. I think the reason they cast him, and they will never admit this even if it's true, maybe they will, who knows, but I think the reason they cast him, just because they wanted a wimpier dude voicing the very simplistic Jello cube to follow the woman around to make her look tougher. That's a theory of mine, I don't know, but either way, he's just very off-putting in this world. Not like there haven't been other characters in the God of War games that had something close to an American accent, but he has no accent, anything close to Norse or Celtic languages or something close to the regions that these gods in the previous games reside. He just sounds like he has a regular American accent, and then his name is Frank. Even looking at this image that I have here on screen, it's just, it's very off-putting just looking at it. I don't know, it's just not the same as seeing Kratos' son next to him with a bow and arrow. Seeing this next to her, I mean, it gave us glorious memes like this one. Also, just shout out to all the people who are debating this thing from both sides, loving this meme. Come on, they put her next to a giant cube. That's awesome. And there are people who are defending the game, the ones similar to the videos I showed at the beginning of this, who saw this meme and said, you know what, okay, that's genuinely very funny. You gotta have a dark sense of humor sometimes. But anyway, yeah, I agree with people that it does come off like a Marvel-type Disney character. Now, whether that is a political agenda or anything close to like the theory I had about trying to cast a wimpy male as the voice for it, who might also come off that way as he dialogues with Faye throughout the game, and she'll take more charge and obviously appears to be more of the leader in the game, and he'll follow along like a sidekick. It's just a bad choice overall for the vibe of the God of War franchise, I believe. Maybe a little bonus one before getting into number 5. Her looks, so there's been complaints about that. Just very quickly, she's not super attractive is what they're saying. I don't think she's ugly. I don't think she's downright gorgeous in the game. She's made to look like a middle-aged woman. She's a god who's lived for a very long time, but she's supposed to look like somebody who's an older god who's obviously had a child. However you want to work out all that logic and aging, she's supposed to look older. She's supposed to look middle-aged. You can have a good game with a female character that leads the game and isn't the most attractive. Now, I do disagree with people like Alana Pierce, apparently, according to rumors, defending ugly characters in games, specifically women, saying that you don't need girls in games to look super attractive, and she's been defending the use of not necessarily downright ugly, but just not the most attractive female faces like most Japanese games try to go for. I just downright disagree with that. I think when you're doing video games, movies, TV shows, there's nothing wrong with going more attractive. There's nothing immoral about it. Hollywood's been doing it for years. People don't really complain about it. If you're going to watch somebody on screen for a couple hours or play a video game with them for multiple hours of your life, typically a lot of people want an attractive face to look at. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. There's a reason Alana Pierce puts on makeup. There's nothing wrong with that. She wants to look more attractive sometimes. That's fine. People want characters to look more attractive. That's fine. Her not looking this way, it's not really a huge issue. Which comes down to the final point, which is number 5, men versus women in sports, video games, and movies. And if you're wondering why I added those extra ones, you'll see. As you saw in the beginning clips that I showed, people are being called idiots, misogynists, bigots, and in that one clip, apparently you're being called a mediophile, or haven't been on YouTube for a while, not sure what we're allowed to say these days, but you know what he's calling you when he referenced the Epstein list. So just because you don't want to play as a woman, you're referenced as that, or just someone who hates women in general. Like I said, very deep and intellectual stuff from the opposition. I just want to break that down very simply when comparing it to, say, sports, for example. Let's look at basketball specifically. Let's compare the WNBA to the NBA. The NBA generates roughly $10 billion annually in revenue compared to the WNBA's roughly $200 million to $300 million. When it comes to the regular season, NBA averages around 1.53 million viewers per national TV broadcast, while the WNBA averages around 1.3 million viewers on networks like ESPN, performing at roughly 85% of the NBA's regular season viewership. However, in the finals, postseason and finals, NBA averages roughly 11.3 million to 11.6 million viewers for its championship series, while the WNBA averages around 1.6 million viewers for its championship series. Let's look at one movie example to something that is a close enough comparison to the subject we're talking about. Let's look at the new Supergirl movie that is connected to the previous Superman movie that just came out in 2025. The 2005 Superman movie was a global box office hit, bringing in $618.7 million worldwide, $354.2 million domestic, off a $225 million budget. In contrast, Supergirl is pacing far behind. Supergirl tracked for a $45 million to $77 million domestic opening, and it's estimated to make a global total between $250 million and $425 million. Let's bring up some video game examples. Resident Evil, Bayonetta, Metroid, and Tomb Raider. A lot of video games with female leads, and who buys most of these games? Men. Men buy more video games than women still to this day. When it comes to who are the primary gamers today, it is still men over women. Even if the gap isn't as big as it used to be, it's still more men play video games today than women. There are more gamers in the sense of playing on console or PC than women. A lot of times when they try to show you the numbers of female gamers versus male gamers, they're counting mobile games. Yes, technically they're video games, but however you want to take that, that is something that is taken heavily into consideration when comparing those numbers. More women are downloading games off the App Store and playing on their phones than men do, and more men are playing on PC and console than women. With that said, we're still purchasing more games than women, and when it came to all those games I just listed, men were the primary ones to purchase those. They were the ones that gave those games most of their money. All this argument about them being misogynistic and that we don't want to see females lead in our games, well, they led in those games. They were the main characters in those games, and we still bought them. The one thing that I think people are going to say against this is, well, that was an older generation of men. Now there's a newer generation of men, and this new generation, they're just a lost cause, and it's the manosphere, and they're just anti-women. I don't find that to be a good argument, which I thought they would argue that we're getting more progressive and that people back then were horrible, but apparently the men back then who were gamers were more progressive than nowadays. That's up to them to make that argument, but no, there were recent Metroid games released. There was a recent Resident Evil game where you played as a woman half the time. Bayonetta 3 came out recently. There's a new Tomb Raider coming out that people are excited for. I don't see a lot of hate for these games, and when they came out in very recent years, or they're being announced to come out, I have not seen any large group of people get together and say, oh my goodness, women are leading in these games. I don't want to play these. This is not interesting to us at all. Who thought this was a good idea? Oh, people from the past thought this was a good idea? Well, we disagree with those men, and we don't want to play as these people. I'm not seeing that, because these are established characters that have been around for a long time that people fell in love with, and typically weren't side characters brought into another character's franchise that all of a sudden they were expected to just love and adore as much as the character who's carried the entire thing for years. That's the key difference between this God of War coming up and those previous female-led action games. It's not because a new generation of men is here that are different, and it's not because the men who did play those games have changed and they're expressing their change in opinion now. Now, why did I bring up the sports example and say the movie example? I'm going to give my opinion on something that I think a lot of people will agree with, a lot of people will not agree with, but you can let me know in the comments how you feel about this. And that is simply this. When it comes to sports, movies, video games, people in general, both men and women, are typically going to want to see men in those positions, and the reason why is because men are typically stronger, faster, just more entertaining to watch, in action sequences. I know you want to rush ahead to the argument of magic and how that can be the great equalizer, or guns, for example. But before we even get into that, just look at the sports. WNBA versus NBA, there's been a huge debate for years, and it's always had a pretty simple answer to it, but people just don't like it. The truth is, more men and women, just families in general, watch the NBA versus the WNBA, and I think the answer is pretty simple. You have two groups of human beings told what the sport of basketball is. It's described to you, it sounds fun. You're told, do you want to see a group of human beings play this game? The answer is yes, sounds very entertaining, I'd like to watch. Okay, there's another group of human beings over here on the other side that are typically, on average, much taller, stronger, faster, and will just be overall more entertaining physically than, say, the first group that I introduced you to. Which would you like to watch? And most people, throughout the years, with their money and their views, have answered the question very clearly. The men will watch that group. There is nothing misogynistic, there is nothing hateful or immoral about that choice. That is just a preference because of biology. There's nothing wrong with that. When it comes to movies, apparently even visually, people would rather just see a male physique in a action sequence like that. Superman obviously made more money than Supergirl. You could say that's a great equalizer. They both have super strength. They can both fight with each other. Apparently in the movies and comics, Superman and Supergirl have fought, and they've said that she's just as strong as him in a lot of comics and different versions of the DC universe. But yet nobody wants to go see her movie, despite anybody saying, well, the comics say that they're just as strong as each other in some cases. People don't care about that apparently, and they want to go see Superman. Women with their purchasing power went to go see Superman more than Supergirl. Men did the same. Neither of them are bigots. Neither of them are idiots. Neither of them are mediaphiles that belong on the Epstein list just because they want to go see a man in an action movie versus a woman. That is a ridiculous argument from the defenders of this God of War game. And it's insulting, which is typically the only way that these people know how to argue, is just to call you names and insult you, because they can't actually have an intellectual debate with you about these things and bring up actual arguments that make sense. The stats just don't agree with them. The statistics over the years and the purchasing power of men and women at the box office and for video games have just proven time and time again that they would rather play as a man in these situations, but women have done this too. So, by their logic, all the women who are watching this right now, if you have preferred to see men in action movies versus women and see men fighting other men in boxing matches and on the basketball court instead of women, you apparently are misogynistic and you hate your own gender, according to these TikTokers. The target audience just isn't going to be primarily men. If you think about it logically, just comparing it to the previous examples I gave, Samus is a beautiful woman, but is also inside of a suit most of the game. You rarely see her face, and she looks more like a robot than anything else. A very cool design, but looks like a man or woman could be in there. Bayonetta has more sex appeal than anything and has guns on her feet and magic. And then you have Tomb Raider, which is not really a so much just go in there and fight with her fists a whole group of men at once, but you're sneaking around the jungle, you're using booby traps, and you have guns. So you're more a silent assassin type of explorer in that game than anything else. Resident Evil, very good example. We just had a new Resident Evil game that came out where you played as Leon Kennedy for half the game, and you also played as Grace for the other half of the game. Talk about a pretty perfect comparison. That was a game that was split down the middle, and when you played as the dude, you were playing in action sequences, you were deflecting missiles with a freaking axe, and you were just fighting a bunch of monsters and villains, whereas when you played as the woman for half of the game, you were running around most of the time scared, you had one gun with one bullet, and you barely survived. I didn't see anybody complaining about that too much. Even with all these games, what I'm saying is there wasn't just a straight up, here's a woman that just fights and is as strong as men around here, ignoring basic biology. That just didn't happen. I think we made a pretty good point as to all of those games having something that the men could be drawn into. The cool suit, the sex appeal for Bayonetta, the guns on her feet, Tomb Raider being an explorer, being silent assassin. Having more of a horror experience with Grace in the houses and buildings versus Leon Kennedy, knowing that you were just playing an action game as him. Those games didn't just give you a woman to play as, they did other things to draw in everybody. This new God of War is not doing that. This new God of War is just saying, Here's a middle-aged mother for you to play as. She doesn't look as cool as Kratos. She doesn't look as strong as Kratos. And when you're playing a game with this much destruction and fighting, typically men and women would want to see a strong, menacing, cooler-looking character than someone that literally just it goes in the opposite direction of all of those things. There's nothing wrong with that. Those are just preferences. You're not a bigot. You're not misogynistic. You don't hate women just because of that. If they want to say that, then they have to apply that to all the women that go see Superman instead of Supergirl and all the people that watch the NBA instead of the WNBA. Those are the 5 things. Just wanted to go over real quick. There's nothing wrong with them making a spin-off chapter. There's nothing immoral about it. It's nothing wrong with it. Do I think it's a good idea? Not really. I think if they did just straight up skip over to Kratos in Egypt, that would have been better. If there's lore reasons why they have to do this, as opposed to it's just going to be a political agenda and they're just doing it for the obvious reasons of just trying to fill a quota, then unless this has some significance in the story to lead up to that next chapter with Kratos, and so we need to see this for lore reasons, then I'm fine with that. But again, it's just tough for them because of all the reasons we already went through. It's a brand new character, so not a lot of interest in playing somebody that we don't know too much about. We've only heard about from previous lore, and we haven't played as them or been with them for as many years as Kratos. So because of that, not too excited. I don't think it's going to make as much. I don't think it's going to sell very well. With this much debate going on back and forth, typically a game is not going to be very successful, and it just doesn't look like it's going to do very well. But I can see flaws on both sides, mostly with the side that are calling people bigots and misogynists for simply not being excited about the game. There's nothing wrong with that. I disagree with the original God of War creator about not liking the 2018 version. I think that was a fine thing to do to make Kratos grow a bit as a character. But of course, they're trying to piggyback on that and use that disagreement with the original creator to defend this game and say that it's a wonderful idea and that it better be accepted by everybody, simply because Kratos loved her and she was referenced in the game a few times with admiration. That doesn't make for a new chapter. That doesn't mean people have to be excited. That doesn't mean people have to love this new character. That doesn't mean men suddenly have to magically switch off their preferences that have been around for years, which is preferably to play as their own gender, or just specifically a character that looks stronger, tougher, and cooler as an action hero. Nothing wrong with having those preferences. Those are my thoughts. Got a little pissed off at all the opposition online saying the crazy, stupid things that they were saying, like you saw in the beginning of this video. So just wanted to make a response to that. Look, women make up a huge audience for movies, video games, and sports. They still do. Not as much as the men, but they still do. They could easily make female-led movies, games, and sports #1. They could easily do that with their views and their money, but they don't. And that says something. And that's something that those TikTokers and other people who are defending this game refuse to acknowledge. At the very least, they refuse to acknowledge the real reason behind it. Because they know if they do, it'll prove them wrong. And it'll mean that there's nothing wrong with you, and there's nothing hateful about you for not wanting to play this game that has a woman as the lead role. So don't worry, they're going to continue to insult you. They're going to call you idiots. They're going to call you bigots. They're going to say you hate women. Ignore it. Be better. Use facts. Use reason. Use logic, which is everything they hate. Thank you guys for watching. Just getting back into things. Hopefully I'll try to upload more often and not take as long as a break as I did. Have a good one.